Violence is very important to ISIS's worldview, but it is more a means to an end rather than an end in itself. For example, in order to establish a caliphate, committing violence in the name of offensive or defensive jihad is fundamental to ISIS, but it is not committing acts of violence purely for the acts themselves. I think it is a bit of both. Definitely some of ISIS's most violent acts were in order for propaganda and recruitment purposes, such as the immolation of a Jordanian pilot. That was definitely an act just to make it gain more followers. However, in Iraq and Syria, there's been a general brutalization on the ground, with each of our participants participating in brutal acts. For example, I've spent a lot of time interviewing Iraqis and Syrians who lived under ISIS, and many of them stated that there is no difference in the brutality of ISIS compared to the Syrian army, the Free Syrian Army, or Jabhat al-Nusra. This is a very interesting question and something that is of much debate at the moment in the literature. I think it is actually a bit of both. When ISIS combatants come back from Syria or Iraq to Europe, often their battlefield training is not actually relevant for the European domestic arena. For example, the training they receive is on warfare, and the lethal weapons that they use they cannot actually get. So in the most lethal attacks you have seen in Europe, such as the Paris, Brussels and Manchester bombings, there's been a combination of combatants who have fought in Syria and Iraq and domestic cells. And this merging of the two, I think, is what is more lethal. Yes, undoubtedly. ISIS's extreme acts and brutality invited both Western and non-Western governments to intervene in the conflict. And it provided an easy justification to combat terrorism and to combat the brutality of ISIS for governments to come in and fight them on the ground. If ISIS hadn't committed these acts, it is perhaps likely that certain governments would not have intervened. But on the other hand, if ISIS hadn't committed these violent acts, then it might not have got the high levels of recruitment that it has seen over the past few years.